Is U.S. President Trump's controversial decision-making and temperament taking us to the brink with a nuclear-armed North Korea? Well, he's fired as FBI director. How will he handle North Korea, Russia, and Syria? We have an exclusive interview with former U.S. Secretary of Defense William Perry, who warns of a new nuclear arms race. I'm Dana Lewis. This is Insight. Welcome to Insight. Donald Trump's presidency is coming under new pressure with the sacking of FBI Director James Comey, but some of the biggest questions relate to his defense policies. William Perry held the role of U.S. Defense Secretary during the Clinton administration, and he joins me now from Stanford University in California to talk about the dangers of our nuclear world. Mr. Perry, thanks so much for talking to us. Without being overly dramatic in the first question, I really do want to ask you, do you worry about World War III, given what's going on globally right now?
I think there's a possibility we could blunder into a war, and that war could escalate. It would be nothing like World War I or World War II. I mean, a nuclear war is something like we could never even imagine. But yes, I think there's a danger, but not a danger that either side would deliberately start such a war, but a danger there'd be some sort of a misunderstanding that would turn into some kind of a military conflict, and that conflict could escalate into a war.
You run the William Perry Project, which is really a project to educate people about the dangers of nuclear war and nuclear exchanges. Do you fear that some nations are starting to talk about a survivable nuclear exchange or a limited nuclear exchange?
I can't really conceive of a survivable nuclear exchange. The danger of escalating is too great. And if it escalated, it's basically the end of civilization. So all of our emphasis should be on preventing that first exchange of nuclear weapons. Prevention is the key here. There's no real way of organizing our society so that we could survive a nuclear war. But I want to be very clear that I think there's no likelihood that either of the nuclear powers, either Russia or the United States, would deliberately start a nuclear war. The danger is not a planned, calculated nuclear war, it's that we would blunder into a war. And by the way, that was the danger during the Cold War, too. We always planned on a possibility of a surprise attack from the Soviet Union, but in retrospect, it's quite clear that that was not the danger. The danger was that we would blunder into a war through a miscalculation or through an accident.
Let's talk about North Korea. When you were Defense Secretary under President Clinton, how close did we come to the brink in 1994?
In 1994, we were very close to a war, closer than most people realize. And it was a very dangerous situation, but happily that crisis was resolved through diplomacy.
But there was actual strike planning by the U.S. to take out North Korea's nuclear sites.
We had a plan for a preemptive strike sitting on my desk, and I reviewed it, and it would have worked. It was a clean surgical strike in one sense, in the sense that it would have taken out the North Korean nuclear capability with very few casualties, and it was a high probability of success. But in another sense, it was not so clean, because it seemed quite clear that North Korea would respond some way militarily, and that military response could escalate into a full-scale Korean war. So that would not have been clean and surgical. So we did not favor a military action that was available, but it was on the table, so to speak, but it was very far back on the table. Most of our efforts and energy were directed towards diplomatic solutions. But beyond that preemptive strike, we recognized that whatever we did, North Korea might itself initiate an attack. And so we had a plan for reinforcing our troops over in North Korea by 20 or 30,000 troops. A very serious plan, and we were almost ready to implement that plan when we got word that Kim Il-sung was ready to negotiate a solution to the problem.
He was ready to negotiate, and did. And there were terms of reference for North Korea after that, and then it turned out that they were cheating on their nuclear program. In retrospect, do you think you all made a mistake? That had you taken out his nuclear program then, it would have been a lot easier than the situation, the no-win situation that is now on the desk of President Trump?
That's very hard to say. We could have taken out their nuclear program at Yongbyon then, but they were very tenacious, and they could have started a program outside of Yongbyon. In fact, we believe that today their nuclear program is not only concentrated at Yongbyon. We believe they have other locations as well for their enriching of uranium. So it certainly would have, the diplomacy delayed the problem by perhaps 10 years. A military strike would have delayed the problem also, maybe even longer than that, maybe 15 years. But the underlying problem was that North Korea felt insecure, and they felt the only way, they understood that the South Korean and the United military, buttressed by the United States, was more than a match for them, and they feared there was going to be some sort of an attack to overthrow their regime. And so they felt that their nuclear weapons would give them the security that they wanted. So they had a strong desire over many decades to have a nuclear program, and that was the underlying problem. Any particular action we took, a preemptive strike or diplomacy, if it didn't deal with that underlying problem, it was apt to reoccur, and indeed it has reoccurred.
Indeed, it has reoccurred, and the problem is, how do you deal with them? I mean, how would you advise President Trump to deal with this leadership? He has even suggested that he would talk to them right now. Do you think that's a strategic error to even send that message?
I think diplomacy is the only solution available to us. The preemptive strike, a military option, it's very predictable what would happen if we did that. If we strike North Korea today, they're going to strike back at South Korea. There's going to be some sort of a military response to that. That military response could all too easily escalate. And if it escalated into a real war, it'd be a war which, of course, North Korea would lose. And as they lost it, then they might be tempted to use their nuclear weapons as some sort of a last gasp, sort of a Korean Armageddon, so to speak. So the thing about their nuclear weapons today is, as dangerous as they are, the danger is not that they are conceiving or planning or would conduct a surprise attack, a preemptive attack of their own, because they know if they do that their leadership would be killed and their country devastated by the American response. This country is not, the leadership is not crazy. They're reckless, they're ruthless, but they're not crazy. They have goals, and their goals are oriented around the survival of their regime. And they know that if they have conducted an attack with the nuclear weapons, the regime is toast. It's all over. So we should focus on what the dangers are. It's not that they would conduct a surprise attack on us. It is that their nuclear weapons may embolden them to take more provocative conventional actions, and those conventional actions could escalate into some kind of a war.
But
so
the program is building.
Dangerous, and we should work to.
The program is building. Would you be opposed to a nuclear or a preemptive strike, not a nuclear strike? Would you be opposed to a preemptive strike against North Korea, even if they roll out an ICBM that's capable of hitting Washington? I mean, at what point do you feel the U.S. has to act?
Let me be clear that the danger is not just Washington. They have missiles today that can strike Tokyo, they can strike Seoul, they can strike any city in South Korea. Japan and South Korea are our allies. So the problem is here today. It's not just waiting for them to get an ICBM. And we need to be dealing with that problem. It gets worse, of course, if they have an ICBM. It gets worse if they build more nuclear weapons. So it seems to me the first goal of our diplomacy is to freeze them where they are so the problem does not get any worse than what it is. And then the second goal of the diplomacy is to start to roll back what they have.
Mr. Perry, please stay with us.
I do believe there's an opportunity for diplomacy.
We're speaking to former U.S. Defense Secretary William Perry. And when we return, Russia and the U.S., should the U.S. be trying to match Putin's nuclear arsenal missile for missile?